you ever write letters to people? Or do you telephone friends and family instead when you want to speak to them? Or maybe you email when you wish to get in touch? Or perhaps you just reach for your mobile phone and send a quick text. Technology means that there are many different ways of communicating with people, far more than even 20 years ago, and certainly more than 100 years ago. In the past, when people needed to send messages, a letter could take days to be delivered, even if it wasn't going to leave the country. Letters were put into wagons which were pulled by horses, or individual riders would carry a letter from one place to another and deliver it by hand. If letters were to be sent overseas, then it would take weeks for the boat to reach its destination and the letter to arrive at the correct place. The way of life changes very quickly. Nowadays, a letter sent from England to Australia takes just a few days, and we can send a text message to the other side of the world and it arrives almost instantaneously. In one generation, there's been a massive change in the practice of letter writing. I went to boarding school for a while when I was a child and began regularly to write letters to my parents. Later, once I was grown up, my parents lived abroad, and again I would write to them frequently. 2 of my own children live abroad now, and so yet again I find myself writing regular letters to keep in touch with them. Of course, I telephone them sometimes, and text them, and email as well, but I'm still happiest writing a letter. I always think a letter is so nice to receive too, as you can ponder over it and take your time and keep it for later on if you want. I have a bundle of letters written to me by my oldest son, who's a soldier, which I shall always treasure. I also have letters from my parents written years ago, and very occasionally I like to take them out and reread them. It's interesting to note that my 2 children living abroad nearly always respond to my letters with phone calls, emails, or texts. They really don't like letter writing, perhaps because they're too busy, or because they're not so used to it, or they're just more tuned in to technology than I am. So I wonder if their generation is less a letter writing generation than mine. I love to write letters, and even more love to receive them, and so for this reason I hope to help you to love the idea of letter writing as well. Of course, there are all sorts of different types of letters, and ones that you would use for one occasion would be entirely inappropriate for another. For example, there's the business letter, the job application letter, the condolence letter when someone has died, the letter of congratulation, the pen pal letter, the job resignation letter, a thank you letter, a letter to a friend, the letter from the bank informing you that you've got no money left, the letter from the dentist to remind you of your checkup. There are many more as well, but that's enough to be starting with. In this section, we're going to concentrate on the letter to a friend, the nice, chatty sort of letter that anybody would be very happy to receive and to reply to as well. Now that we have email, ordinary letter writing is sometimes referred to as snail mail, because it takes so much longer to reach its destination than does electronic mail. I'm a great lover of snail mail, and feel a small leap of excitement when I see upon my mat in the morning a letter that I know is from my brother, or, rarely, one of my children. The trouble with email is that your computer can go wrong, or you may delete things by mistake and not bother to retrieve them, whereas snail mail is stubbornly there until you decide definitely to get rid of it. Not many of us will keep all the emails we receive from friends and family, but quite a few people will do as I do and hoard little bundles of precious letters to read again years later. Here are some tips for you when you're writing a snail letter to a friend. 1. Write your letter as neatly as possible. It's always a pleasure to read neatly presented work, and it tells the recipient, the person getting the letter, that you care enough to have made a good effort. It's very annoying to be struggling to decipher the words of an untidy letter because the writer was in a hurry and couldn't be bothered to make the writing legible. Usually when that happens, the reader just gives up and doesn't even bother to finish reading the whole thing. Number 2. People often ask questions in letters. After all, a letter is really a conversation, one side at a time, and in conversation we're always asking questions. Make sure that you reply to your friends' questions and ask some of your own as well. That way, the correspondence will continue to flow between you, and you know that the other person is interested in you and you in him or her. 3. The easiest letter to write is to someone whom you know well, an old friend or a member of the family. You already have a good idea of their interests and what they know about you, so it isn't too hard to think of stuff to write about. If you're writing a snail letter to a potential pen pal, it's more difficult. In the first letter to a pen pal, tell him or her a little bit about yourself and why you think you would make great pen pals. Don't overload your new pen pal with too much information in the first letter. Just a few facts about yourself is enough. Ask a few questions so that he or she can easily write back with information. Say what your interests and hobbies are, what you do at school. Describe your family and home and where you live. 4. At the end of your first letter to a potential pen pal, don't say that you expect to hear back from them soon. Instead, say that you'd love to hear from them if they're interested in being your pal. Even when it's someone whom you know very well, it's better to say that you're looking forward to hearing from him or her, rather than that you expect a reply soon. 5. Once you have regular correspondence with a friend, there's a huge list of topics for you to talk about. Remember also that your pen friend may well have never visited your country, so things that seem uninteresting to you may be fascinating to him or her. Here are a few topics for you to write about: family, brothers and sisters, pets, family traditions, your dreams for the future, boy, girlfriend trouble or not, sports, hobbies, games, clubs you belong to, your school, your favourite teacher and subject, your least favourite of both, television that you enjoy and your favourite programmes, your favourite book, colour, author, band, food, animal, song, music you like, current affairs, the news, pollution, global warming, world poverty, the Olympic Games, medical issues, war, what you might do in the long summer holidays, the Christmas holidays, etc. Number 6. To make a letter more interesting and exciting to receive, you can always put something inside the envelope. Make sure you obtain a medium-sized envelope for this purpose and only include 1 or 2 of the following items at any one time. No need to put the whole lot in all at once. Here are some things that might make your letter more interesting: a postcard, newspaper clippings, something about the local history of your town or city, a tape recording of you speaking to your friend. Let other members of your family join in. I used to do this often when I lived away from my family, and we all really enjoyed listening. One advantage is that you can rewind whenever you want and hear certain bits over again. Photos are always good to receive, so that your new friend, or even an old one, knows what you and your family look like. Always check with your parents first that it's okay to do this. Stickers, a poem that you've written, a card that you've made with a poem inside, written by you. You can be assured that your friend will enjoy receiving such well thought out letters. As with any form of writing, try to make your letter interesting with careful use of words and descriptive phrases. It doesn't have to be all flowery and unnatural or sound as if you're trying to write a poem, unless you are, of course. But if you aren't interested in what you're writing, the recipient won't be interested in reading it either. Make sure you write a letter when you're feeling cheerful. Nobody wants to receive a miserable and dull letter. Of course, if something upsetting has happened to you and you're telling your friend about it, a true friend will want to hear and to help. But if you're just feeling a bit down, wait until you're a bit happier before writing. Last of all, be truthful in what you say. Obviously, you'll try not to hurt anyone, but don't pretend to things you disagree with just to try and make friends. Everybody's different and entitled to be so, and so respect each other for those differences. If you don't get a reply to your first letter to a potential pen pal, write once more, but try not to be pushy. Just repeat that you'd like to be pen friends, but understand if the other person is too busy, and perhaps they'd let you know. See if you can find someone else. Remember, just because it doesn't work with the first person, doesn't mean you have to give up on the idea. Here's a small challenge for you. Do you have any cousins about the same age as yourself? Or do you have any friends who live in a different town? Write them a nice newsy letter telling them all about what you're up to at school, if you belong to any clubs, what you've been doing at the weekends, where you went on your last holiday, what your favourite type of sport or music is. Imagine they're surprised to hear from you, especially if this is the first time you've written to them. Put something interesting in the envelope with the letter so it's more fun for them to receive. End the letter by saying that you look forward to hearing all their news if they'd like to write back to you. You could make your letter more interesting by illustrating it or by the addition of symbols instead of words in some places. Have fun whilst you're being creative. I hope you'll receive a reply before too long. Before I go, I'm going to add a final postscript. In month 1, you listened to Alan talking about pen pals. He explained to you that it's very important to follow certain steps when you're looking for a pen pal, so make sure that you do follow his advice.